Northwest Missouri State play host to number 11 Emporia State on Family Day here in Maryville. Welcome to Bearcat Game Day. I'm Wiley and with me is Jaden, Varner, and Jaden. Let's just address the elephant in the room. It is windy like none other here in Maryville today.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see my hair, and it's not a fun time for me right now, but it's going to be a fun day for football. That's all I know.
Yeah, and you look at the slate today in the MIAA. Obviously, you have Northwest hosting Emporia State, but coming up just in about 30 minutes in Warrensburg, Missouri, is Nebraska Kearney looking to get things done against Central Missouri, who the last time we had a pregame show here in Maryville, Central Missouri fell in that one, in their home game. And then you also have coming up at 2 o'clock, you got Washburn and Missouri Western in St. Joseph, Missouri, just down the road from Maryville. Then you also have Missouri Southern and Northeastern State and Fort Hays State and Central Oklahoma. So another big slate in the MIAA.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look back to last week, I know you mentioned that last time we had this pregame, you mentioned how crazy the MIAA could really be, and I don't think there's a better way to explain that one than just looking at last week. I mean, you look at it. I mean, Fort Hays came out against Northeastern in 37-0. Central Missouri, Davenport, that was a close game. I mean, you just look up and down the schedule for last week, and it's just the epitome of what MIAA football really is.
Yeah, and especially, we go back 2 weeks to the weekend of the 14th, and Northwest got the win 32-20 over Fort Hays State, but another big one was a shootout with Central Oklahoma and Central Missouri. Central Oklahoma getting the win 57-40 over in Edmond, Oklahoma, and that one really shook things up. But something that shook things up even more was Emporia State pulling out a squeaker against Pitt State 24-21 in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And so you look at those two were the front runners in the MIAA. Now the conference is wide open.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at it, I mean, Pittsburgh and Emporia State have been, so for the last couple of years, have been one of the powerhouses, and for Emporia State to get that win over them was huge. And so far, I mean, you look at what Emporia State's done so far, close games against some really good schools, and I think for them, I think that's kind of propelled them, especially that Pittsburgh State game. That's kind of taken them over the top these last couple of games because they've been real close to losing in a couple of these.
Yeah, and we'll sit there and talk more about Emporia State and Northwest as we get on with our game day show. But let's first open things up with the game this week to start at the 1 o'clock slate. Central Missouri playing host to Nebraska Kearney in Warrensburg, Missouri. Central Missouri still a top dog here in the MIAA to start the season, but we're starting to hit that midway point, all of conference play. And what are some thoughts that you have about Central Missouri so far this season?
Yeah, I mean, they're coming off of a 1-point win against Davenport, and I mean, an offensive explosion would be an understatement. Over 500 yards of total offense. I believe their quarterback, Zach Zabrowski, had over 340 yards through the air and then 65 on the ground. He had 414 yards of offense just by himself. So I think it's a big thing for them that he had such of a big game for himself, and then also led a game-winning drive. 6 minutes left of the game, brought it down to about a minute to go win that game for them, and that's clutch. You can't really teach that. That's just a clutch gene that he has, and that's what's got them to where they're at right now.
And you look at the conditions for Warrensburg today. When the Mules are back at home, it's a traditional blackout game, I should mention. And so, obviously having those alternative jerseys, the energy's fired up, everyone's just ready to go. And, given the circumstances, the situation, I know we have Family Day here in Maryville. We had military appreciation at the last home game back on September 14th. So knowing what an atmosphere like that can bring, what do you think is going to happen with Central Missouri in this one?
I really do think that there's some emotion into that game, and it's like what we saw here. Fort Hays came to town, and it was like, oh, Fort Hays, this shouldn't even be a close game. But Military Appreciation Day was a big thing. I do think that adds a little bit of a factor to that game. There's going to be a lot of emotion that people don't realize. Now, Nebraska Kearney is a very good team, and I do think that they have, at least I would hope that they have taken that into consideration. But yeah, I think that's going to be a huge boost there in Warrensburg.
You look at this, and what are your predictions for this game? Let's jump right into that. I know this game's another good game to look at the MIAA, where you look at Nebraska Kearney, who got a win back in Kearney against Northwest earlier this season, and Central Missouri, who's trying to still find that stride after taking a loss. Who do you got in this one?
You know what? I'm going to take Central Missouri in this one. I'm going to say it's going to be 27-10. I know that may be a surprise, but like you mentioned, there's some emotion in that game today. There's a lot of stuff going on. Of course, the Lopers, they have been able to win some close games, obviously against Northwest, but I do think that UCM, they get it today, 27-10.
I think I'm going to stick on that same script with you. Give me the Mules in this one. I think it's going to be 35-20. I think Nebraska Kearney is able to move the ball, and I think they're able to score, but at the same time, Central Missouri is going to sit there. They're going to be very aggressive on the offense and defensive side, and there's going to be some turnovers that Kearney's going to wish they had back in that loss. Now we'll move on to St. Joseph, where Missouri Western's playing host to Washburn. And, you know, when you look at the Griffins this season, the way they started this season, it started out really well for them. And now it's just kind of sat and take a back seat. They're not looking the best they want to be. And they fell last week to Emporia State, who really, it literally was in the fingertips of the Griffins to win it, and they dropped it at the last second.
Yeah, and that was the big talking point that I wanted to bring up, is that, I mean, you have it at their 34-yard line, and just so close. You had a touchdown opportunity just before that, too, and they fumbled the game away, and that leads to a victory because they kicked a field goal on their drive before that. But yeah, when you come that close against a team that good as an Emporia State, I mean, you have to play perfect, as close to perfect as possible. And like the one mistake that they had, it cost them really big. And yeah, they had that in their hands for an overtime drive. And yeah, you can't do that against a team like Emporia State.
Yeah, when you look at how that game last week fared for the Griffins, I mean, they had opportunity after opportunity to take the game into their hands, and you know, now they fall to 2-2, 1-2 in the MIAA, and so now they're looking to bounce back against this Washburn team. And Washburn's they've been a little quiet this season, to say the least. They haven't been able to do a whole lot, but at the same time, you know, knowing Washburn and knowing the history of the program, they're definitely able to bounce back and win some games if needed.
Yeah, and if you look at their game too, I mean, it's very similar to what happened with Mo West against Emporia. I mean, close game in the fourth quarter. It was 32-31. Washburn had the ball, and they just couldn't do anything with it. And again, it led to Pittsburgh going down and going and scoring and winning that game eventually 39-31. But yeah, and their fortunes have just been not there for Washburn. 0-3 start, and frankly, that's probably been the closest game that they've been in so far. It's been rough for them so far.
You know, and a big thing for this Griffins defense that it could help them seal this win, and you know, he kind of helped out last week, and it's Nico Oliver who leads the team on defense with 11 tackles, 9 solo ones, and Javarius McGuinn added to the second most with 7 and 1 tackle for loss. And then you look at also leading the team in 5 sacks is also Grant Finley. And so when you look at that defense and you look at the pressure they're going to bring to Washburn, what does that mean for the Ichabods?
Yeah, I mean, you see what they've done. I don't think that Pittsburgh's defense last week gave them that much of a problem, but I do think that Mo West's defense, especially what you mentioned, the sacks and everything, getting to them is a big deal. And I think that they may overlook that a little bit because they're like, oh, this isn't quite Pittsburgh State. They're going to be a little less, but I think that's what's going to get to them today. However, I do think that they just have enough of a want-to and a will today that I think it might propel them a little bit, but I do think they have to make sure that they focus on that defense more than I think they normally would.
And, you know, just kind of looking at Washburn's schedule, I mean, they have arguably the hardest conference in the MIAA, if not maybe this half of the Division II side. I mean, they look at all of their losses and they face top 10 teams. They're not, it's a tough schedule for Washburn, and so looking to face a team, I would say lesser than a top 10 team is Missouri Western, who can still calibrate just like any top 25, top 15, top 10 team. You know, you look at that and it's like, man, they really wish they had some of them close games back where they fell to number 4, Colorado Mines, 31-28, and then fell to number 10 Pitt State at the time, 39-31. So you look at those losses and you look at who they've had to play. Really, I mean, Washburn's in this game despite their record.
Yeah, I mean, and they're battle tested for sure. I think, like you said, there are a lot of close games, a lot of big opponents. I do think they do get the win today. I think they get it 31-28. I just think that they just have been struck through the mud so much so far that they just finally had enough. They're going to get a win today, and I just think it's going to be a grit determined. It's going to be a close one, like the score says, but I think they're going to dig this one out.
Yeah, and you know, you look at who the Ichabods have had to play. You know, I agree with you. I think Washburn gets the win. Just they're battle tested. They're ready to go. They're ready to fight. And I think the Ichabods get this one 35-28. I think the offense is able to wake up. They've competed against top 10 teams, and so you just look at the calibration of how they've had to perform, how they've had to compete. It really does favor them coming into St. Joe this week and getting ultimately the upset over the Griffins. Now we're going to take it to the 3 o'clock slate here, Jaden, and this is Missouri Southern taking on Northeastern State. And this one, the Bearcats were in Joplin last week. They got the win 59-0, a very convincing win to say the least for Northwest Missouri State. And so when you look at this game and Mo South happened to go to Broken Arrow to face the Riverhawks, what are some things that you're looking at in this game?
I mean, yeah, you look at what Northeastern State's done so far. They have struggled. They have been blown out 2 out of the 3 games so far. The last close game they had was actually against Missouri Western, the first game of the season. But yeah, they have just struggled. There haven't been a whole lot of things gone well for them. And I think for this game, obviously look at Southern. Obviously they got blown out last week, and they have done some good things this season, but I think for Northeast, you just have to get back to the basics for them. I mean, everything so far has been not working, so get back to some high percentage completion plays, some just high percentage plays in general to kind of get back into. You may not win this week, but you've got to get some rhythm into that offense and keep things going for the rest of the season.
And we saw that last week, or I should say 2 weeks ago with the Bearcats, where they were sitting 0-2, looking at the first 0-3 start since the 1994 season, and the Bearcats went back to the basics. Power I, Wildcat, they spread it out the ball, they went right up the middle, they did a lot of things that you don't see the Bearcats do. And so if you're the Riverhawks right now, you really got to sit there and go, what can we do that's going to be effective, and what can we do that's going to work 9 times out of 10? And this is the first neutral site game for Northeastern State against Missouri Southern in Broken Arrow. This will be the first one since 1995 when the team played Panhandle State in Owasso. And so you look at that and you look at, it's a neutral site game. There's a lot on the line. You know, it's not your home atmosphere, but at the same time, it's not an away team atmosphere. So what do you think about this one for both the Riverhawks and the Lions?
You know, as someone who's also kind of been in a weird limbo where they've been at away sites and stuff, it's a little different. Normally, at least if it's an away game, you're used to kind of expecting that away crowd and kind of get used to that. But when it's in a neutral site, you don't really have much of a favorable advantage for anything. I think it'll be a little weird for each team. It might start out a little slow, but I do think it comes down to what they can do there. They know that there's not a whole lot of pressure around them, so it's just time for them to do what they can do best. I think Missouri Southern, they've got a bad taste in their mouth, obviously last week getting blown out. So you really look at and they see the Northeastern team struggling really bad. I think that this is their time to have an offensive explosion, and as far as Northeastern goes, they're just going to have to expect that's going to come, and they just have to make sure that they're, like what we saw with the Bearcats a couple weeks ago, get back to the basics, get back to the stuff that you know how to do good. And I think that's what's going to come down to it. I do think Missouri Southern wins this game, but, you know, some good things have to happen for Northeastern.
You know, Northeastern State, they had the lowest tally offensively, going 257 yards last week in the shutout loss against Fort Hays State. And, you know, we saw Fort Hays State back here on September 14th, and that program looks good. And so when you sit here and look at Northeastern State and getting shut out by the Tigers, it really puts things into retrospect of what the Riverhawks have to do if they want to get the win at Broken Arrow today. And another thing, their rushing attack has to look for room against Missouri Southern. The Bearcats found it. And, you know, if you look at that tape last week between the Lions and the Bearcats, that is something the Riverhawks need to do, is be able to run that ball consistently against this defense in Mo South.
Yeah, they absolutely have to do that. And if that just means running the ball for a good chunk of your drives, then so be it. Make sure that their defensive line gets tired, because, I mean, like you said, like what we've seen many teams do against that defense, just run the ball up the middle. And I think if you're going to win that game, that's what you're going to have to do.
And also on the other side of the ball, they have the worst rushing defense in the MIAA. They sit at the bottom, allowing 793 rushing yards over the whole season, averaging almost 200 given up rushing yards, and they've also given up 5.3 yards per carry and 10 rushing touchdowns this season. So if you're Missouri Southern, offensively, you got to run the ball. I mean, when you look at how defenses thrive and how defenses crumble, it all starts on that rush defense.
Yeah, and you really have to flip that script. You got to keep your defense off the field for as long as possible, because what you've seen so far is them getting tired, and they can't keep up doing anything because their offense is being off the field so much. And so, yeah, you've got to help out your defense. I mean, they're trying to give you ways to win this game. I think they've had a couple turnovers in their last few games that could have done something with, but when you're just so tired, you can only do so much. So yeah, like you said, run the ball, make sure your defense is off the field as much as possible. Give them a rest, because them big boys, they can't hold on for too much longer like that.
And, you know, the last thing before we give us our recap here, Luke Mulligan passing through the air, having himself a week last week, 18 for 28 for 141 yards, and then big plays in the second half ultimately helped them. But in this one, Jaden, who do you have?
Yeah, I'm going to take Southern at 17-14. It'll be a rather low-scoring game, but I do think Southern gets the win.
I think in this one, give me Northeastern State. I think they're able to bounce things back in that neutral site, and I really do think that they're able to fight through adversity and get the win. I think Missouri Southern's offense just, they look like they kind of curled up in more of a defensive position last week against Northwest, and if Northeastern State wants to get this win, they're going to have to fight, and they're going to have to fight hard for that win. But coming up here on our Bearcat pregame show, we'll highlight Fort Hays State and Central Oklahoma, and then the game of the week here in Maryville, the Bearcats playing host to Emporia State. You're watching the Bearcat pregame show on KNWT TV and listening on KZLX 106.7, the student station for Bearcat Nation. We'll be right back.
KZLX is a student-run radio station where Northwest students have complete freedom during their shifts. KZLX also hosts mini radio shows such as Nermageddon, Revive, Day-to-Day Picks, and more. To learn more, visit kzlxfm.com.
Are you tired of the same boring old TV? Tired of watching the same recycled content? Then try Gen 2! Gen 2 is your favorite place for all things gaming and tech related. Come check out our wide variety of games and reviews, catch the latest in gaming and tech news. And if you call right now for the low price of $0 down, you will even get 7 free, yes free, of our very own handcrafted shows and stories for your viewing pleasure. Don't miss out and call now to get the entire Gen 2 package for free! Gen 2, the full package just for you.
Welcome back to the Bearcat pregame show. I'm Wiley Ray, and with me is Jaden Varner. And now we're going to talk a little bit about number 23 Central Oklahoma, who found the rankings this week in the Division II spot as they're playing host to Fort Hays State, where we saw how Fort Hays State played against Northwest in Maryville a couple weeks ago. But this Central Oklahoma team has started to revive under the past head coach for the Northwest Missouri State Bearcats, Adam Dorrell. And Jaden, this one will be another good game here in the MIAA.
Yeah, I think this one could have a game of the week thing written all over it, although I do personally think the one here is the game of the week for me. But yeah, you look at what Fort Hays has done. Obviously, a loss here to the Bearcats was a kind of a stain on their season so far, but then of course last week they get a blowout win. So I think for them, they still don't like that Bearcat loss. I think that's going to propel them a little bit in this game, although Central Oklahoma is a very good team, and we've seen that. They're 3-0 this season, and they've also won by a large margin against some really good teams as well. I mean, Langston in the first game of their season, and then obviously Central Missouri, that was a big surprising game for a lot of people. But I think this one is going to be a back and forth heavyweight match. This is like some Mike Tyson stuff here. Who's gonna swing that knockout punch, you know?
Yeah, and I think you're correct about that. I mean, like you said, we were surprised by the UCM outcome, and that one really kind of shocked a lot of us here in Maryville, because you sat there in Central Oklahoma last year. They put up a fight against Northwest, but it wasn't a huge fight. You know, Adam Dorrell still bringing that tradition just to a different team in UCO, but just kind of looking at the expectations from this season, I would say a lot of people had the Broncos' expectations a little bit lower, but a lot of people did not see them in the top 25. And to see them at number 23 really just shows the strength that they have, the impact Dorrell has on them, and also just shows how strong this conference is in a whole.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, you look at it, and with how many teams come back and forth with how good and stuff they can be, I mean, it's going to be a fight no matter what, and they know it too. They know that these are all good teams, and I think it comes down to who just has it, who wants it more. And I think right now Central Oklahoma is that team that's like, hey, everybody kind of counted us out. They thought we weren't going to be good enough, so we're going to make statement win after statement win. And I think for them, they have that chip on their shoulder that's like, hey, who has it better than us type thing right now. So I think that's going to propel them past Fort Hays today, and they see that ranking. They want to go higher. 23 is not good enough for them.
And when you look at how UCO's offense ranks, they're number 1 in total offense in Division II at 583 yards per game. And you know, you look at that offense, and that's a powerful offense to be sitting in the MIAA. And you know, it also shows a threat to other teams looking to play them. And you know, the Bearcats defense, they've been able to halt a lot of offenses lately, and later on in the season the Bearcats will test that against Central Oklahoma. But the Broncos passing attack ranks 6th with 322 yards per game, and the rushing attack ranks 4th with 260 yards per game. When you look at how you're able to fluctuate both the rushing and the passing offense, I mean, those are ingredients for a perfect offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's rare to see two of like your both offense and your running and passing game be top 10 in both categories. It's kind of an oddity thing, and the fact that they have both of that really could speak to the coaching and everything. I mean, they know what they got to do. They know that they can be a dual threat team, and I think that you've seen it so far. They have really inflicted their pain and will on every single team they face with. It doesn't seem like it seems like nobody can stop it, really. I mean, it's a hard thing to defend, and it's an interesting thing to watch too, because you're like, well, man, how are they're going to keep running it, but then they can just keep passing darts through the middle of the field. And I think that one is a big thing for them against Fort Hays this week too.
Yeah, you're talking about passing darts. I mean, let's talk about the sophomore Jet Huff. I mean, he put up He's ranked number 1 in the country in passing completion percentage with 77%. First off, as a sophomore in Division II, that's a crazy stat nonetheless. And then 5th in the country in completions per game. But he also is ranked 6th in the country in passing yards with 313 and total offense with 329. But he threw for 192 yards in 4 touchdowns in the 72-0 win over Langston week 1, and then went 457 yards and 2 scores in UCO's win against Central Missouri. And so you just look at the production he's been giving as a sophomore caliber quarterback. This sophomore is playing as a senior. He's playing as a freshman in D1. I mean, he's playing outstanding right now for Central Oklahoma.
Yeah, he's kind of the maestro right now. He is a symphony and an orchestra, and he is playing a fine tune right now. You know what I'm saying? And he's just doing it well. And I think, yeah, you like what you said. He's a sophomore quarterback looking like he's been there for a while, and he's been in this program. But yeah, I don't think it can be understated how well he is playing right now. And I think if you're him, you're like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm going to keep doing my thing. And I do like them in this game, and I'm going to give them the win.
So you said you're going to give him the win. What's your score prediction here in this one for Central Oklahoma?
That's one of the rough one. I don't know if I want to go a high or low, but I'm going to go high. I'm going to go 38-31 right now. That's my score prediction. I think that's what it's going to be.
You know, I think this one's a big win for Central Oklahoma. I think the way Jet Huff's been playing, the way the defense and the offense have both been producing, and they're firing on all cylinders, I think they get the win. Oh man, this one's a tough one. I think give it to me 42-14. I think the defense gives up some points, but I think the offense ultimately fires on all cylinders and gets the big win. And now, Jaden, we're here in Maryville at Bearcat Stadium as teams are getting ready behind us. Bearcat's wearing the green shells with the white pants, green helmet, and shoulder pads for those who may not know the football term. And Emporia State coming in with all white and a black helmet. And, you know, you can hear it in the mics. You can see our hair. It is a windy one here in Maryville.
Yeah, and like we said, we were watching some of the pregame, some of the punts and stuff. And, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Now, the good thing is that the Bearcats obviously have green tops, green helmets, and boy, it is beautiful. Let me tell you, I do wish that the wind would stop blowing. My hair is kind of it's really messing with me here. But yeah, you look at what the Bearcats did against Southern last week, and again, that's just accumulation of what's gone on this season. I mean, Chris Runke, the passing game has really exploded. That's something that we really didn't expect to see coming into this season. You know, of course, the staple of Northwest has always been that run game, but in 2 games so far this season, he's had over 300 yards. Last week was a season high 331 in the air, and I mean, how do you stop him? I mean, he's got Luke Matthews down the field somewhere.
Yeah, and you know, the biggest answer is you can't stop it. I mean, the only way you can stop it, and we saw it in the first 2 weeks, was that defense. The defense needs to get back to Runke, and right now the offensive line has done a phenomenal job here in the last 2 weeks, and it definitely shows. I mean, 0-2, the first 2 games where they went 0-2 in the record books. I mean, the offensive line really didn't seem like they woke up, and that week 3 and week 4, the offensive line has really woken up and has kept Runke safe. And Runke also in the rushing aspect, he's not afraid to move around the pocket. He's not afraid to find things that happen. And so when you look at Runke, he's like a Swiss Army knife. He has all the utensils and all the supplies to be a good quarterback.
Yeah, and absolutely he does. I mean, I think you can go back to that Fort Hays State game where you really saw the offensive line and the team come together as one final unit, and I think that's going to be their turning point of this whole season. And I think if they can get a win here, that's going to really build up some confidence in them, and Runke is just going to keep slinging the ball, and Tank Young and Jaden Brady are going to continue to do their thing tonight.
Yeah, and when you look at last season here, Emporia State was the home opener for the Bearcats, and the Bearcats threw 5 interceptions in the loss, and that really was kind of the thorn in the side of the Bearcats season last year, and kind of what was a recipe for almost a disaster, some may say, of how the season turned out for Northwest. But Northwest ultimately holds the lead 36-3 in the all-time series, but last year they had a 20-game win streak snapped at home, and you know, so you kind of look at that. The Bearcats looking to bounce back here today.
Yeah, they can't let that be the last thing that everybody remembers. They got to let everybody know that the Bearcats are still the Bearcats, and they're still going to give you a hard-fought fight, and they're going to probably win this game by just sheer grit, will, and power to get to this game, because they want it bad. They know they do.
Yeah, and you look at that third down efficiency. Northwest ranks #1 in the MIAA and #6 in the nation on third down conversion percentage, which is a great statistic to have as an offense, because you can sit there and be confident with what play you want to call. And you know, a lot of plays we saw, a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of offensive coordinators are really scared to sit there and go under center, go for that QB sneak or that tush push, some may call it. But ultimately, Northwest has been doing that a lot lately, and you love to see it on those short down conversions.
Yeah, they're not afraid to be aggressive on those third downs, and frankly, that's what you want as a team. game. If your coach is telling you, hey, we're not afraid to be aggressive on these third downs, it makes you want to play a little bit harder for them. And I think that's what Coach Wright's done so far. And I think that they're going to continue to do that, especially against this team. Obviously, it's getting a little louder out here now. All the family weekend festivities are going, and I think that's even going to bring some power. Everybody's got their family here. People from out of state, like 3 states away, are all here. So I think that's going to give them a little bit more of a boost tonight.
Yeah, and you talk about it being family weekend. It's what embodies Northwest Missouri State University's tradition and family, as we mentioned earlier. And right now we have the B&B starting to come in. You love to see the B&B. You love to have the cheer team here. And so having all of those keys, plus your family members are here, you're battling for more than just the name on the back of your jersey. You're battling for the name on the front of your jersey and the red patch that you have on your chest. And so when you look at this game, I mean, it's a great weekend, a beautiful weekend, other than the wind, but it's spelling a recipe for success for Northwest Missouri State.
Yeah, boy, I'm excited. The adrenaline's flowing. Man, I love college football so much. I'm going to take the Bearcats tonight. I'm going to say it's going to be a big win. I'm going to take it 42-17.
I think, you look at how Emporia State has played this season. I mean, we cannot forget about Mr. Gundy here. He threw 47 passes last week in that game in their win last week, against Missouri Western, when they won 30-27 in overtime. And that's one thing to look at, is that passing defense the Bearcats have to have. They're ball hawks. They had a pick 6 last week in that big win against Missouri Southern, but you look at this, and right now Emporia State, they're really sniffing for a win here.
Yeah, I think you've seen with how close their games have been, and really, I think it's going to be close for a couple things, the first part of it, but I think the Bearcats just have so much at stake tonight that they really want to get that win, and I think it's going to propel them a lot farther.
I think another thing to add, Jaden, is you look at how the last 3 games for Emporia State has went. I mean, you look at the schedule, and it was a win, a big win against Washburn, 30-14 to open the season, and then you pull off a 5-point win against Angelo State in Emporia, 17-12, and then you squeak by at Pittsburgh, Kansas, 24-21, and then you barely, literally out of the hands of Missouri Western to get the win in overtime at home in Emporia. And so you look at these last 3 games, and you look at how they've played it really close, and they haven't beaten a team by more than double digits since week 1. And so you sit there and you kind of, as you look at how this team has progressed, and you look at how the games are getting closer and closer and closer, this one really, I think, with all of the atmospheric circumstances, I think with everything going on in the favor of the Bearcats, I really do think that Emporia State's going to slip this one away and break that undefeated streak that they won. And you have to sit there and think of that offense and how they've been producing, and how the Griffins, who sit 2-2 and 1-2 in the MIAA, how they almost pulled off a win on the road in overtime.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just say it right now. We ain't the Griffins. We are the Bearcats, and we are a better team. And I guarantee it, we're getting the win tonight. You can put it on a T-shirt. You can put it anywhere. The Bearcats are getting to win tonight, and they're gonna win big.
And I think in this one, give me Northwest Missouri State in this one. I think it'll be a little bit closer. Give me 35-24. But I think Northwest Missouri State gets the win, and they start that winning streak. 2 wins isn't a winning streak. 3 is. And so the Bearcats look to get that winning streak. And I think this one with a top 25 win. I mean, so far, one of their wins has been over a top 25 team in Fort Hays State, but this one's looking to be an even bigger top 25 win with Emporia State in town. And I think it's a great way to go in, back to be on the road for the Bearcats. And everything is spelling Bearcats here today. I mean, the atmosphere is great. The Bearcats are really practicing, getting warmed up here. The B&B is starting to come in. Cheer squad's coming in. The fans are starting to move in. I mean, you look ahead of us here, Jaden, and there is a lot of Bearcat green here.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not be romantic about football? I mean, just look at it. The atmosphere here is incredible. The wind is about the only downside of it all, but I mean, it's just a great atmosphere here. And I mean, what better day to do it? Saturday football, home, family weekend. Let's do it.
Jaden, we both set our scores. We've both talked our ears off about this MIAA slate. What game is looking the most competitive to you this week?
God, I know I said I wanted to take that Central Oklahoma game, but honestly, I got to give it here tonight, man. I think that there's just a lot of stuff going on here that, I mean, how could you not, I didn't give it to him the last time, so I'm going to give it to him tonight. I think this Bearcats game is going to be the game of the week.
Yeah, we have 38th spot here out of Kansas City, and we're also bringing you the coverage on KZLX 106.7 at 1:45, and also you can see it on on the MIAA network. Thank you to KNWT TV and KZLX 106.7. I've been Wiley Ray. With me is Jaden Varner. We'll catch you on the live stream at 1:45 on KZLX 106.7, the student station for Bearcat Nation. We'll see you guys next time.